All right, guys, welcome back to day 2 of working on the Elkan Backpack. I'm really excited about the progress we've made so far, but we've got some very important changes to make today. So I know I said yesterday that I was okay with the way that our zippers looked. I realized last night that I am not okay with how bad they look. Again, the 1000 denier one and the number 5 one looks fine, but these smaller ones, they just don't look good. And I don't like the idea kind of going forward of stitching over the plastic. So I realized last night as I was watching myself talk while editing the video, because that helped me think a little bit better, is rather than doing this method where we are stitching through that plastic zipper, what we want to try and do is find a way to do what I was doing before, where we're putting a piece of leather or fabric or whatever on top of the zipper, but at no point in time are we ever actually having to stitch over that plastic part of the zipper. And so what I realized last night is that the problem with these initial pockets is the fact that we have that leather on top of the zipper, which adds 2 layers of fairly thick fabric right onto our seam. And so what we need to do is eliminate that thickness, and that is what we did here. But the thing that doesn't work here is stitching over that plastic zipper. So what we need to figure out is a hybrid of both this option and this option. And so knowingly enough, the simplest solution to our problem here, to both get rid of the ugly stitching on these pieces, but also remove our bulk from our edges, is to take our zipper, extend it almost the full length of our pocket. So example, if we have a 1-inch tab on the end here, all we're gonna do is just extend our zipper a 1/2 inch under that tab. No further, and that gives us a 1/2 inch on the end to then become our seam allowance for when we flip it over and zip and put the zippers in and all that. Then we only are dealing with one single thickness of material on the ends, while also having a much easier connection point from our zipper to our fabric, or we could go back to using leather, because if we just have that single piece of leather on there, honestly, I don't see a problem with that either. But it's as simple as just extending that zipper a little bit underneath that material to then make sure that everything holds together, and we absolutely do not have to stitch over those plastic teeth. We can do a much easier stitch. We can cut off some of the teeth to make it just easier to get that needle through that piece of fabric.
Focus, child. Focus on the face. There we go. Thank you.
So we're gonna make our new zippers really quickly, and then we'll get on to actually starting to make our main pocket. All right, so it's kind of moment of truth time. So what we've done here so far is I took a 2-inch piece of 1000 denier Cordura. I did a 1/2 inch fold on one side to make it line up with our line on the inside there. Then on the zipper, we cut the teeth off 3/8 of an inch in. That way our teeth kind of do protrude underneath that piece of fabric without going too far under. And then I stuck the zipper a 1/2 inch onto here, lining up with our little folded over tab. That gives us 3 layers of material that we're now gonna stitch through, which should give it a lot more stability compared to what we were doing before. We were just stitching through 2 layers of fabric, or a layer of fabric in the zipper. So going through 3 layers here is gonna actually be really tough, and we shouldn't have any of the zipper or plastic underneath our presser foot, except on the outer edge here that we're gonna kind of use as our guide, but that part shouldn't affect the stitching part of it. So we should be able to get a nice even stitch along the whole piece without it touching any of the plastic. So our foot that has the 1/8 inch measurement on it doesn't work at all, because it is hitting that plastic part of the zipper and just having issues. If it didn't have the foot on the other side, I think it would work better. So instead we're just gonna go to a single-sided foot, and we're just gonna have to kind of guess that 1/8 inch measurement. Shouldn't be too hard. And I think that we're also gonna do a double stitch. So we'll stitch at an 1/8 inch down, then we'll probably put a second stitch on there, because we have the space and it honestly looks pretty good. But even that first stitch, it looks okay. It actually looks a lot more even compared to any of the other stitches we've done. And the stitch line is right at the bottom of those teeth. So that is literally the perfect outcome for that piece. So we're gonna get the rest of these stitched up, and then we'll move over to the number 3 zippers. So our zippers are now done, and I think that they finally look good. I think this is the best combination of different techniques. It works so well. It is a little bit more effort than either of the other techniques because we do have more, you have to think about your measurements and your folds and all this stuff. It is a little bit more work, but it does work better. I also think that I did mention this in my shop tour video. One of the things I would like to look into more now is a lighter duty industrial machine, or just a different industrial machine. Something that is specifically meant to handle these lighter weight threads that I use for fabrics. Because I think the problem with my Texo 4800 is that it is just a little bit too intense for what we're trying to sew here, because I tend to try to keep it tension for working with the thicker parts of the project, so the gussets, working with leather, those kinds of things. Even with the Tex 90 thread that I'm using on there, I tend to keep it a little bit higher tension because I need it like that for those other parts of the project. So when we're starting to work with like a number 3 zipper and this 400 denier ripstop, it gets a little over tensioned in our stitching. So having another machine that is dedicated to that lighter tension, lighter weight materials would be good. But even here, I did only one stitch line on the with the 400 denier ripstop and the number 3 zipper, just because it looked a little bit more proportional. Even on that number 5 zipper, in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd only done one stitch on there, one stitch line. I think it would have looked a little bit better. But the 2 stitch lines also give it extra reinforcement, so it's not really a bad thing either. So our next step here is we're going to go through and add on all of the other parts to these pockets to actually make them pockets, all the actual material that makes a pocket. So we're going to get that done, and we should be done this front panel pretty quick here, actually. I'm super excited to see how this comes together after all this stressing about the zippers. This is probably the most complex part of this whole thing, is just trying to make those zippers attached to everything. So once we get that done, we'll be good. So we're remaking some more parts. Those parts that I cut out, the fabric that I cut out yesterday, I realized that I cut it to the final width of the pocket, not to the oversized width, which I needed to cut it to. I didn't think about that when I was making the pocket, or making the pieces yesterday, that they needed to be oversized in order to then be cut down to size once we do all of our final stitching and assembly, because that's what you always want to do. And I keep trying to tell myself that, and I keep forgetting it constantly, is that you always want to make things bigger, assemble it, and then cut it to be the size that you want, the final size that you want. It's super easy. We've got our patterns and everything. I know what the final size of these pieces need to be, and I just need to be able to cut them to that size afterwards, because just unlike woodworking where you have a solid material, fabric, even this very stiff fabric, has a little bit of stretch to it. So as you're stitching it, it tends to tightens up a little bit, and it's not the exact same length. It doesn't stay the same length as you cut it originally. So we're gonna recut out those pieces and continue on with what we're already doing. All right, so we have an outside and we have an inside, and we're almost done. We have one final step that is just installing our side zippers. That is gonna then be the thing that opens up this whole front panel area. So now all we're gonna do is we're gonna take our pieces, put them like that, put our zipper in, we're gonna stitch them, we're gonna roll them inside out, we're gonna put an 1/8 inch nice little holding stitch on the edge there, and this piece will be done. But before we do that, I actually just thought of this. For our zippers that we're putting on our side, we do need to put that little bottom piece as well. I wasn't actually originally planning to do that, but now I think I should, because it works a lot better and it makes the bag look better. So, yeah, we're gonna do that actually, how do you do that? Because we need to put in, no, we're not. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out some tabs that will then make our ends of our zipper. We're gonna dye both sides of it, and then we can actually finish the inside face of it with some Tokeno. Anyway, we can finish the inside face of it to give it a little bit of a better appearance, and then that'll be our zipper. No, but we'll still have the transition there we'll have the transition that I don't like. Damn it. How do I cover that up though? How do I? The brain is not working the proper way. I think I just want the zipper to go all the way in. Because the only way to do it with fabric would be to put fabric on both sides. So then if we put fabric, if I do leather, no, because you're still gonna have this, you're gonna have the end of that zipper terminating on there, unless you go far enough down, but then you still have that little, like that raunchy looking zipper portion for however far down. The plan has changed about 20 times in the last 5 seconds here. So what we're gonna do, zipper is just gonna go all the way to the seam. It's gonna be a nice, easy, just a straight piece of zipper, nothing fancy going on. And that way, when we actually put the piece on the bag, the zipper will go down, we'll fold our pieces of material on the inside. We are gonna have to stitch over that plastic zipper, but it should be fine. Should be fine. We'll leave that problem for a later Morgan to deal with. So unlike my first attempt where I folded it out and realized that I was never ever going to be able to stitch through it, this one I actually am fairly confident that we can stitch through all of our parts. Because all we need to do now, we have it stitched, we have this pocket part stitched to the zipper. We just need to do a top stitch in order to hold everything nice and flat and keep things a little bit more consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first take it over to the iron and we're going to try and press it down as much as we can. All right guys, so front top pocket is done. So this is awesome because this is precisely what I wanted to get out of this. It looks amazing. I'm actually super impressed that I was able to get a nice 1/8 inch stitch down here. Now you might notice the top edge is still rough. We're gonna deal with that later on in the project. We're gonna be doing some nice leather edge trim on the top. I also thought about it while I was doing the ironing is that I could just leave a full width zipper on there. It actually gives me something to kind of pull on as I'm doing the stitching and the ironing and that. So I was able to get a really, just a beautifully tight seam all the way down that stitch line, which I'm I'm super excited about. And the fact that I was able to fold things over here worked really well. One thing I will note on though is my staggering the zippers, it worked except for right here. This top edge of the inside zipper and the bottom edge of the outside zipper are actually perfectly aligned with each other, so that we ended up with a pretty thick amount of material right there. But again, because we are only really dealing with that fabric, the machine had no issue with it. So guys, I hope you're enjoying the project so far, because I'm really just having a lot of fun making this bag. Let me know if you guys are an experienced sewer, leather worker, whatever, like if you have experience working in the materials that I'm working in. Let me know if there's stuff that you think I could do better, because again, I'm in this for the learning opportunity. I want to get better at making these bags. And so if you guys have any advice, I would love to hear it in the comments down below, or you guys can reach out to me on my website. But as always guys, I do hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next one.